Welcome back to the podcast and welcome to the first video podcast. Thank you for joining me. Today's topic is what's the best way to learn a language. So recently I was reading an article by the BBC and the title was What's the Best Way to Learn a Language? And the reason I was reading it was not just for this podcast, but for me as well. I've been studying Japanese for 10 years. 10 years and I'm still working at it every single day, still making mistakes, still discovering things I don't understand. So today, let's take a look at this article together and see what it can teach both of us. The article is written by a journalist named Krupa Paddy. She grew up in the UK, but her family background is Indian. As a child, she spoke Gujarati at home. She later learned Hindi by watching Indian TV dramas, just by listening with subtitles. She studied French at university and even spent a year living in Paris. She also picked up some Spanish. In other words, she's a serious language learner, someone who has put in real time and real effort into learning different languages. But here's what I found interesting. Even she had started to wonder, is there a faster, easier way to learn a language? Because these days her social media is full of adverts saying things like learn a language in 30 days, just 30 minutes a day. Sound familiar? I'm sure you've seen similar ads too. Apps, websites, YouTube channels, all promising fast results. So she decided to investigate. What does the science really say? Krupa teamed up with two researchers at Lancaster University in the United Kingdom, Professor Patrick Rebushat and Professor Padraig Monahan. Both of them study how people learn languages. They designed a special experiment for her. Over 6 days, she would spend 30 minutes a day doing language tasks. The languages, Mandarin Chinese and Portuguese. Now, here's the important thing. She wasn't given any lessons. No grammar explanations, no vocabulary lists, no teacher standing at the front of a classroom. Instead, she was simply exposed to the language, sounds, words, images, and her brain had to figure things out on its own. This kind of learning has a name. The researchers called it cross-situational learning, or CSL. It's the natural built-in ability we all have to find patterns in language, to notice, for example, that a certain sound keeps appearing next to a certain image. Over time, our brain starts to make connections. Professor Rebushat explained it this way. People can learn very, very fast simply by keeping track of the statistics in the environment. In other words, our brains are constantly looking for patterns, even when we don't realize it. So how did Krupa do? With Portuguese, she did very well. By the third day, her accuracy was between 90 and 100%. The researchers said this was higher than a typical English-speaking learner. Why? Because Krupa already knew French and Spanish, languages that are similar to Portuguese. Her existing language knowledge gave her a head start. With Mandarin, however, it was much harder. Mandarin tones were completely new to her. But even so, after just 3 days, her ability to recognize the right sounds had clearly improved. The researchers said she had a good ear, meaning she was able to notice small differences in sounds, rhythm, and pronunciation. That's a real skill in language learning. I know what you might be thinking right now. This sounds like me in English, and yes, you're right. Every time you listen to a podcast like this one, your brain is doing exactly this kind of pattern finding work. You might not always notice it, but it's happening. Now, here's the part of the article that I think is most important and most honest. Even though Krupa showed strong results after just a few days, Professor Rebushat was very clear. That is not the same as fluency. He said achieving fluency in the real world requires sustained exposure, interaction, feedback, and social use over many months or years. He also mentioned that at the US Defense Language Institute, one of the most serious language training programs in the world, even there, with up to 7 hours of study every day, it takes about 64 weeks just to reach basic professional ability in languages like Japanese or Persian. 64 weeks. That's more than a year of 7 hours of study a day. And you know what? When I read that, I felt relieved. Not discouraged, relieved, because it confirmed what I already knew from my own experience with Japanese. Learning a language properly takes a long time. It's supposed to. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something real and challenging. So what about all those apps and AI tools? Are they useful? The researchers said yes, but only as a supplement, as a support, not as a replacement for real human interaction. Professor Monahan made a point that really stayed with me. He said that about 70% of any language is made up of just a few hundred common words. So in theory, you can learn those words very quickly. But, and this is the important part, understanding what people say back to you is a completely different challenge, because real people use the other 30% too. The rarer words, the cultural expressions, the phrases that don't translate directly. Krupa gave a wonderful example from her own experience. In Gujarati, her family sometimes says a phrase that literally means, "Don't drink my blood." But what it actually means is, "Stop annoying me." I think about Japanese and how often this happens. The language is full of expressions that you simply cannot learn from an app. You have to hear them in context. You have to experience them. Professor Monahan put it simply, it's not going to replace that really high-level study of a language. So what is the best way to learn a language according to the BBC? Here's my summary. Your brain is naturally good at finding patterns. Short, regular practice sessions really do work, and there is science behind them. Your existing language knowledge helps you learn new languages faster. But true fluency takes sustained time, real interaction, and human connection, and no app or technology can fully replace that. For me personally, this article reminded me why I keep studying Japanese even after 10 years. Not because I'm chasing fluency as some kind of finish line, but because the process itself, the listening, the noticing, the gradual understanding, that process is valuable every single day. And I believe the same is true for you and your English. You're not behind, you're not slow, you're doing something that takes real time and real courage, communicating across languages and cultures. That deserves respect. Thank you for listening today. Keep going, and I'll see you in the next episode.